Imagine a country where machines do more than replace human labor. They begin to reach into the deepest emotional gaps of human life. While the world is still debating the future of artificial intelligence, Japan has quietly placed robots in train stations, hospitals, nursing homes, and even into the most private corners of emotional life. Here, robots do not just deliver packages or assist in disasters. They care for the elderly. They soothe loneliness. They simulate the feeling of parenthood. They even stand in classrooms, teaching where humans are no longer present. What shocks the world is not the sophistication of the technology, but the question behind it. What kind of pressure forces a society to go this far? For Americans, this story is not only about Japan. It is an early warning of a future that may arrive faster than expected. When technology becomes good enough to fill the spaces humans leave behind, are we truly solving the problem, or are we learning how to live with a very different kind of absence? To understand why Japan has become the boldest testing ground for the relationship between humans and machines, we have to look at the very real pressures this society is facing. This is not a country chasing technology out of curiosity or to show off technical power. Japan is being pushed into a corner by time, demographics, and even by its own past success. For decades, Japan stood as a symbol of discipline, efficiency, and long life expectancy. People lived longer, healthier, safer lives, but that success created a paradox. The population is aging rapidly while the number of young people keeps shrinking. The workforce contracts every year, while the demand for care, infrastructure, and quality of life keeps rising. Jobs that once required millions of workers now face a simple problem: there are not enough people left to do them. In many countries, this problem can be eased through large-scale immigration. In Japan, that path is far more difficult. Cultural homogeneity, language barriers, and deep caution toward rapid social change make mass immigration politically and socially sensitive. When people cannot be added quickly enough, Japan has been forced to look elsewhere for a solution. That solution has taken the form of robots, but Japan's embrace of robots is not driven only by labor shortages. It is also shaped by how this society views machines. In Japanese culture, the line between objects and spiritual life has never been as rigid as in the West. From ancient folklore to modern pop culture, objects can hold spirit, and machines are not automatically seen as cold or hostile to human life. This creates a rare psychological foundation, where robots are not immediately viewed as job thieves, but as necessary partners. When robots first appeared in warehouses, train stations, and construction sites, the reaction was not panic. It was curiosity and experimentation. Delivery robots are designed to bow and apologize when they block the way. Retail robots speak softly, carefully avoiding pressure. Even massive rescue or rail maintenance robots are presented as tools that protect humans from danger, not symbols of mechanical dominance. This acceptance opened the door to much deeper uses. Once robots moved beyond heavy or repetitive labor, they began entering spaces once considered purely human. Nursing homes are the clearest example. As the elderly population grows, caring for each individual has become an overwhelming burden on families and the healthcare system. Care robots were not created to replace love, but to fill gaps that society no longer has enough people to fill. These robots do more than check heart rates or remind patients to take medicine. They talk. They respond with basic emotional cues. They create a sense of presence. To outsiders, this can feel unsettling. To many Japanese families, it is a practical solution in a world with no perfect options. When children live far away and caregivers are scarce, a machine that listens becomes the least painful alternative. Even more controversial are experiments with baby-like robots and emotional therapy robots. Research shows that caring for something that resembles an infant can activate protective and bonding instincts. In a society facing decades of low birth rates, these experiments are both scientific and deeply symbolic. They reflect a profound anxiety about the breakdown of traditional human bonds. They raise a difficult question: if people are increasingly disconnected from one another, can technology temporarily patch those emotional gaps? For American audiences, this strikes a familiar nerve. On one hand, technology is celebrated as the key to efficiency and convenience. On the other, fear grows about job loss, disconnection, and being replaced. Japan is already living in a future that many other societies are only beginning to imagine. What stands out is that Japan did not wait for a full crisis before acting. It experimented early, accepted mistakes, and adjusted quietly. That quiet approach is what makes this story so powerful. There are no grand declarations urging the world to follow Japan's lead. No promises of a technological paradise. Just a country trying to keep itself functioning in a world where human labor is becoming scarce. When robots enter Japanese daily life, it is not a sign of emotional coldness. It is a response to deeply human pressure, seen through this lens. Images of delivery robots, care robots, and human-like machines are no longer just technological showcases. They are pieces of a larger story about how a society confronts its own limits. A story that, sooner or later, many other countries will be forced to tell in their own way. Once the social foundations had pushed Japan toward technology, the next question was no longer whether to use robots, but where to deploy them first. And Japan's answer was clear and strategic. They did not begin with flashy demonstrations. They started with the jobs few people wanted, yet the ones that keep society running every single day. The spaces where, if humans disappeared, the consequences would be immediate. At logistics centers and warehouses, robots appeared first. Not because these places attract attention, but because they are the choke points of the modern economy. As e-commerce exploded, delivery speed became a matter of survival. Yet the young workforce kept shrinking, while warehouse work remained heavy, repetitive, and injury-prone. Autonomous robots were introduced not to impress, but to keep goods moving on time. They do not get tired, they do not take leave, and most importantly, they do not break supply chains that are not already fragile. From warehouses, robots moved on to the streets. Small delivery machines roll slowly along sidewalks, bowing in apology when they block pedestrians. This detail may seem minor, but it says everything. Japanese robots are not designed to assert dominance. They are designed to blend in, to reduce friction, to exist without disturbing shared space. They follow rules. They stop where they should, and society accepts them as part of urban life. This is not romanticizing machines. It is Japan minimizing social resistance as technology enters real life. In more dangerous environments, the role of robots becomes even clearer. Construction sites, rail systems, and disaster zones are places where risk never disappears. Japan regularly faces earthquakes, floods, and landslides. Each disaster puts human lives on the line. Rescue robots are built to enter spaces humans cannot. They search for signs of life, assess structural safety, and support emergency response. Here, robots are not replacements. They are a buffer between humans and death, even in fields that feel deeply human. Japan introduces machines carefully. Railway maintenance is a powerful example. Massive robotic arms inspect and repair complex structures in short time windows, reducing fatal risks for workers. These robots do not operate alone. They are designed to work with humans. Machines handle weight and precision. Humans supervise and make final decisions. Each does what it does best, alongside heavy and hazardous work. Japan began testing robots in service spaces. Retail assistants and reception robots now appear in airports, hotels, and shopping centers. Their purpose is not emotional warmth. It is continuity. These are positions that require constant presence in a society with too few workers. With neutral voices and carefully scripted responses, robots deliver consistent information without fatigue or frustration. In a culture that values order and reliability, that consistency brings calm. But as robots spread, hard questions inevitably surface. When machines take over repetitive and dangerous labor, what comes next for humans? Japan does not avoid this question. Instead of full replacement, it tries to redefine human roles. People are moved towards supervision, creativity, complex interaction, and decision-making. This requires massive retraining. It is costly, but it is seen as the price of keeping society intact. For American audiences, this approach feels both familiar and unfamiliar. Familiar because technology has always been framed as a productivity tool. Unfamiliar because Japan is not asking who wins between humans and machines. It asks how both can coexist in a society short on people, but not short on responsibility. When you look at robots across Japanese life, from warehouses to sidewalks, from disaster zones to service counters, you begin to see the truth. This is not a race for technological glory. It is a step-by-step survival strategy, built quietly, executed carefully, and designed with almost no room for failure. When robots have already spread across every operating layer of Japanese society, the final boundary technology touches is no longer labor or precision. It is emotion and trust. And this is where the story becomes most complicated, because it forces people to face questions with no real precedent. Machines can work for us, but can they listen, comfort, and stand in for human presence? Inside nursing homes, therapy robots are introduced as an experimental but carefully calculated solution. The seal-like robots, with slow movements and simple responses, are not designed to pretend to be human. They are designed to create the feeling of being noticed. For many older people who live alone or have little social contact, small moments of interaction can visibly shift their mood. Studies suggest anxiety and isolation can decrease when someone feels a presence responding to them, even if that presence is mechanical. Then come the baby robot experiments, one of the most controversial directions of all. These robots are built to mimic infant behavior, from crying sounds to reactions when being held. The goal is not to replace real children. It is to study caregiving instincts and emotional bonding. In a society with long-term low birth rates, understanding and reactivating these instincts is treated as a scientific path. But it also unsettles many people. When humans begin practicing parenthood with a machine, the line between research and replacement starts to feel dangerously thin. These questions do not stay inside personal emotion. They spill into trust and ethics. A robot invited into a temple to deliver a sermon is one of the most striking examples. For some, it is a way to modernize spiritual teaching and reach younger generations raised on technology. For others, it signals that humans are surrendering even sacred space to machines. The argument is not whether the robot's words are correct. It is whether sincerity can travel through a programmed voice at all. What stands out is that Japan does not run away from these debates. Instead of banning or embracing everything, it allows experiments to happen within controlled limits. Scientists, monks, policymakers, and the public take part in the discussion. Technology is not treated as a final answer. It is treated as a tool that must be constantly tested against social reaction. That matters, because it challenges the stereotype of Japan as a society blindly worshipping machines. Yet even with caution, a subtle shift is already underway. As robots increasingly take on the roles of listening, comforting, and being there, humans may begin to adjust what they expect from relationships. The patience required to deal with real people, the unpredictability and imperfection that come with being human, can start to feel less acceptable when compared to machines that always respond the right way. That is an invisible cost no statistic can capture. For American audiences, where debates about AI, ethics, and belief are becoming more intense, this story feels less like a showcase and more like a warning. Japan is ahead not only in technology, but in the lived social experience of sharing life with machines. It is testing limits that many other societies are still arguing about on paper, and this is the turning point. The story shifts from what Japan can do, to a bigger question for all of us. When technology becomes sophisticated enough to imitate care, presence, and even faith, what remains truly irreplaceable? If people begin accepting easy, safe interactions with machines, are we quietly trading away something deeply human without even realizing it? When the story reaches this point, Japan no longer looks like a nation showing off technology. It looks like a living social laboratory, where the future is being tested every single day. What is happening here is not science fiction. It is the result of very practical choices made under very real pressure. And that is exactly why the rest of the world cannot afford to look away. On the surface, Japan appears to be winning. Robots help sustain productivity despite a shrinking workforce. Infrastructure keeps running smoothly. Elderly care remains stronger than in many countries with similar wealth. But beneath that stability, a quiet question is forming. As machines take on more roles, what direction is society actually moving in? One of the deepest shifts is in how work itself is valued. For generations, work in Japan was not just income. It was identity, commitment, discipline, and contribution to the group. Work or to a person's sense of worth. As robots absorb repetitive and dangerous tasks, humans are pushed into new roles, more creative, more supervisory, more abstract. Not everyone adapts easily to that transition. For many older workers, learning to work alongside machines, or being replaced by them, creates a sense of disorientation. They may not face unemployment in the classic sense, but they face something harder to name, the feeling of being less needed. This kind of psychological loss cannot be solved with subsidies or retraining alone. It cuts into a very human need to matter. At the same time, the way people connect with one another is changing. When robots mediate care, services, and even emotional support, human-to-human interaction becomes less frequent. It may grow deeper for those who maintain it, but it becomes rarer overall. Convenience reduces the need to rely on others. That brings freedom. It also weakens the bonds that once formed through inconvenience, friction, and compromise. Japan is not blind to these risks. That is why it does not try to export its model as a universal solution. Instead, it keeps adjusting, testing, and listening. Controversial robot programs are often launched on a small scale, paired with psychological and ethical research. Technology is not placed above people as an unquestionable good. It is treated as a tool that must be restrained and evaluated. Still, not every consequence can be predicted. A younger generation growing up surrounded by robots may develop very different expectations of care, response, and relationships. When a machine is always available, never tired, never judgmental, real humans, with all their flaws, can feel harder to engage with. This is the paradox Japan is living through. Without clear answers yet, for American audiences, this story carries particular weight. The United States leads in technology, but also hosts the fiercest debates about AI, automation, and ethics. Japan functions as an early mirror, showing what happens when technology stops being an idea and becomes social infrastructure. Not everything collapses, but not everything improves either. The core of this story is not about judging right or wrong. It is about recognizing that every technological choice is also a social choice. Japan chose to keep its society running by accepting machines as part of daily life. That choice postponed many crises, but it also opened new questions about humanity, connection, and what it means to be present in an optimized world. And this is where the story moves beyond Japan. It becomes a reminder that the future does not arrive in one dramatic moment. It arrives through small decisions, repeated every day. How we respond to labor shortages, loneliness, and inconvenience today will shape the societies we live in tomorrow. Japan simply reached that question earlier, more clearly, and no longer in theory.